call the meeting to order, 6 p.m. Start with roll call. Jesse?
Present.
Jeremy?
Here.
And I am here. It's 250th, so let's do the pledge. Why not? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. So we'll have a look and approve the minutes from March 30th. Any questions on that? On the minutes or discrepancies?
None.
No.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. All right, thank you. No presentations this evening. Chairperson report, I don't particularly have one. Old business, we'll start with the discussion around potentially transitioning to a charter village. So a couple updates on that. I did send you this morning an FYI on what that timeline would look like based on a conversation with the solicitor. The headline basically is it takes 2 election cycles, at least a year to a year and a half, I think would be like an expedited time frame for that.
Mhm.
We also did confirm that there is no opportunity to delay becoming a city. Once you hit 5,000 in the census, you're a city. That's it. There's no tactic or procedure or method. That's spelled out in the Ohio Constitution as well as in the ORC. So I do think it's prudent. Now, realistically, the census is 2030. When those results are published, I think is early the next year. And then there's probably a couple month lag before the Secretary of State's office would certify that and then proclaim us a city.
Yep.
But essentially we're looking at 5 years from today. We are, unless something dramatically changes, we're going to be a city.
Mhm.
So any questions on that so far?
No, that seems pretty straightforward.
Yep. So that said, there's a lot going on these days, but what I put together was just a quick timeline of what that would look like. So essentially, I think it's really August or early September that we would want to have, I think it's August if memory serves, but I can't remember now if it was 60 or 90 days, but no, 60. So I guess that would be, what's the election date? November 5th? Yeah. Or first week of September. So really in August, probably like late July, you would need to have, we would have to pass a resolution saying that we want to put this on the ballot. And there's 2 questions that go on the ballot.
Mhm.
The first is, do we want to establish a commission to frame a charter? And then it is, okay, if yes, and if a majority vote yes, we need 15 people to be on that charter commission. I should have asked, I forgot to, I'll have to again, whether anybody in council can be on that or not. April, do you know that offhand? Yeah. I'm not sure if we can be on it or not.
Residents, a good bit residents, because I know when I attended their public meeting the other night, last week in South Bloomfield, Mayor Thomas was complaining to try to get 15 people to serve
Yeah.
on the board or the committee. Yeah.
And that's, candidly, that would be one of the challenges, because I think it's going to be a time commitment.
Yeah.
Because you only have a year. If the vote is yes, and we establish that commission, and we get the 15 elected folks to be on that, they have 1 year to put that together. So it is not a ton of time. Now, granted, we wouldn't be creating a charter from scratch. We would likely take a municipality similar to ours, or we would take, what do we do today, and what do we want to add, subtract, modify. So you're not really starting from scratch, but there would be meetings with attorneys, there would be public input meetings, so it will be a time commitment. And then, so yeah, that'd be a year of drafting the charter. And then within no less than 30 days from the election, a notice would have to go out with the draft of the charter provided to every elector in the village. So, yeah, most likely by mail. And then that November would be the vote. And if it's passed, then a certified copy, or the Secretary of State would certify that, and then we'd be a chartered city, or chartered village rather, and then a chartered city from then on out. So I guess I'll just pose the question again, and we talked about this last time, confirming, do we all still feel like this is a prudent course of action to not throw out the timeline right now, but a prudent course of action to pursue a charter for the village, or that we would recommend that to council to discuss and vote on?
How do we see that this charter will play out with the idea of the fact that we're going to move into a city? Is this a charter that will then apply to us as we grow into a city, or do we have to adopt different kinds of structure once we become a city?
My understanding is that this is the structure that you will have once you become a city. If you don't have a charter, then as soon as the census results with over 5,000 are certified, boom, you're a city. And then there are statutory requirements. Like, I believe, April, I don't think you could be fiscal officer and clerk. Those would have to be two separate roles.
Correct.
That's either passing work off to somebody else or hiring more people. So those are changes that are not negotiable. That is, if you don't have a charter, that is. But if you have a charter, my understanding is this is what our government will look like moving forward. You have opportunities to amend the charter later, but reading through, and I can send you guys the link, but reading through, I think it's essentially the same process to amend it as we would go through the whole thing again, and just the commission would go through what the amendments are.
So essentially, like you're saying, back to square one, kind of the 2-year time frame, or
That's how I read it.
okay,
Yeah, that's how I read it. Is that it's essentially Article 18, Section 8. You basically run through that whole process again.
okay.
Submission and adoption.
So if you're amending the charter, it needs to be worth the effort.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Not a small amendment.
So then the big challenge for this group that would do this is the fact that they're going to have to be forward facing. That we realize that whatever we're adopting as a charter, what we're asking people to adopt as a charter, is something that has to carry us through in the longer term.
Yeah. I think the positive is that it gives you more control over what your local government looks like. Whereas if we don't have it, state of Ohio tells us what our local government looks like.
Yep. That's, I mean, I would just fall back on that statement. That was my, like, when I read that, or when we saw that at OML, I was like, that just makes sense. Like, we don't, we should be determining, what goes on in Asheville. So, but I see the obvious hurdles of getting to that point. Yeah. But
I agree. And that's what kind of my next question is we have a lot going on right now, as everyone knows.
Yeah.
Do we want to bring this to council now to consider, discuss, potentially put on the ballot? Because we would need to do that by July. And if we want to get 3 readings, that means we got to start in June, which is only a few weeks away. The pro of that is I think it gives us a couple swings potentially. If we go through and folks say, no, we don't want to do a charter right now, well, we have a year that we can get back to, we can come at it again in a future year. The con is obviously that's a short timeline, and we need folks that would be willing to step up and be on that commission in a relatively short period of time. So we would kind of have a lot of effort to, for lack of a better term, promote this effort and encourage folks to submit their names.
I think maybe before taking it to council, maybe we need to establish what does picking that committee look like. Can there be any elected officials, or is it just 100% residents? And do we need 15 people to, give us their time, undivided for X amount of days, times, whatever. Maybe after we establish what that looks like, then we can bring it back to council as a whole and just say, we've got a short time frame. Do we want to start, or do we want to kick it out, a year, and maybe start building up like a social media campaign and pushing it and saying, next year, here's what we're looking to do, and here's what we need, and something like that.
Does this have to be done in November, or can it be done in May?
somewhere. I think that it has to be. Sorry, I think that it's possible to do it in May, and it's also possible to have a special election. Candidly, I don't know that we would want to have a special election for that. I think we would just stick with
Yeah.
something that's already there.
I mean, I sort of like the idea of, because it is such a really expedited timeline, of perhaps looking at doing it in May. But I'm not married to that. I'm not going to die on that hill. But that's just something that I want to make sure that we're not rushing to get to the finish line quickly, and we don't do it well.
Yeah.
That's my main concern.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah, because that would be a big concern. Is we did start the process and we couldn't get people to commit, to the committee or whatever, whatever that is, and and maybe when we asked the solicitor about whether there can be any elected officials or not, it's well, can we get data on another municipality of our size that has done it and see what kind of commitments did they have to give, so that way we can sell that to people. Like, okay, if you want to be a part of this committee, you've got to live here a year, whatever. This is what the time commitments might look like, and all that.
Yeah, makes sense, because I could also see that you couldn't have any more than 3 of council members being on for sunshine laws. So that even if we are allowed to participate, then you still probably need 12 electors from the village. So
yeah. So at this point, I would say it might be advantageous for us to wait and not rush it in May, for November, so that we can do it well till May. But that's
I would recommend that I'll reach out to Brian, and I have a couple of questions. The solicitor: can elected officials be on the commission? Would that be restricted to less than or equal to 3 of council? Can we do this election in a May primary, or does it have to be a general? And I think if we have answers to that, that would definitely inform. And if we can do it in May in a primary, then I think that, at least for now, is kind of a.
And then maybe ask him if he's been a part of any other of his clients, maybe if he's been a part of a chartered to non-chartered transition, to see if he can share any details. Or
I think he said he has been before, not a ton, but it might be worthwhile to have him at a meeting to speak to the full council.
Yeah. If once we get it to the point where we're ready to have the council vote on it, it might be helpful to have him there for something like that.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so we're set there. A few questions to ask him. The next time we meet, we can discuss when and if to bring it to council.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep, I like that.
I mean, and really, if you're going to ask him this question this weekend, he's going to get back to you and he's going to say, no, it has to be done in a general election. Then perhaps we could consider meeting again in a week or two to try to formulate a plan if we feel like it's important enough to try to get this going in November, if that's the only option.
Yeah.
Does that seem reasonable? Or
Yep.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. I'm good with that.
Good. No motions or anything, right? Just wait until. Okay. Thank you. So the next one I had, and I apologize, I didn't catch it soon enough. The next thing I had for old business was PPA.
Yep.
Candidly, I, at this point, am not prepared to bring that to council in light of some recent events. So I would, obviously, discussion, but I would be in favor of holding off on that for the time being. Still encourage intergovernmental cooperation. I think that, I've been banging that drum for a while that we need to do that, but I think for now we hold off on bringing formal PPA participation to council.
Yeah, and I think that participation exists whether or not we get active or be a part of that. So I back that as well.
Okay.
So,
all right. Any other old business? No.
don't have anything.
Yep.
All right. So moving on to new business. New business, the one item that I have is a building off of our last committee of the whole meeting, the presentation that we had there, discussing a study on the health impacts of data center infrastructure on the surrounding community. So you know, I think we talked about it in session that, you know, I'm certainly not opposed to evaluating other potential vendors. And Jesse, I know you put a packet together, so it looks like you've got a RFP scorecard in there.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a whole bunch of information, so
I'll let you start.
we don't have to go through it all, but I'll explain what everything is so you guys can digest it. I'm not saying it needs to all be digested this meeting, but
Sure.
so I reached out to, I don't know if you remember this individual, but you might have been copied on these emails back when this all kind of first came off. Richard Klein is his name. He's with Community Environmental Defense Services. And this might have even been before you were on council, but there was a lot of emails going back and forth, just trying to give us information on what to expect and the environmental impacts. So I reached out to him, and I also reached out to a contact in Wilmington as well too, because I know they've got a big lawsuit down there going on. So she didn't have a lot of details for me, so I leaned on Richard. He gave me a name, Gary Palisco. Works for the state of Washington. I don't know what his exact title is, but he was able to provide me with a list of air quality consultants. It's going to be this one here. It's a master list of about 18 companies that they lean into when they're doing these types of studies. So I took this list. I kind of condensed it down to agencies or companies that would be able to be consistent with being, you know, with a municipality in Ohio. Because some of these are like Washington-based only companies, because it is from the state of Washington. So I narrowed it down to a list of about 8 or 9 that would be suitable for Ohio for us to use based on our municipality size, which is going to be this one right here, shorter list. And then of those 8 or 9, I basically just said, what are the top 3? And it narrowed it down for me. And ultimately, it seems like out of those 3, Trinity Consultants is going to be the better one based on kind of all of what they're capable of. So that was kind of where what I wanted to point out was this company here, but there's still a lot of other choices to look from.
Yeah.
So I started doing some comparison with the top 3 versus Empower, which is the gentleman that came to our committee of the whole. And so it seems like the Empower business is more along the line of like, what's the best way to put it, is more like statistics. Biostatistics.
Yep.
So not necessarily as much on the science aspect, but like more statistics. So, and I'm probably not explaining this like perfectly, but the way I kind of envisioned it was the statistics part would be good information if we were at a point where, let's say, we didn't have necessarily like the zoning was in place to kind of prevent this, or maybe we were considering it, whereas now we don't really have a whole lot of option to consider it. We're kind of, it's getting force fed to us essentially. So I was leaning more towards looking at other companies that have the ability to kind of come at it from like engineers, you know, and more of like the state standards, because now that's really what we need to see is what if it's going to meet state standards ultimately. So that's kind of what I thought, like, well, let's compare, you know, these top 3 versus Empower. And it's literally just data that you guys can look at and see, you know, just kind of see if it makes sense. I felt pretty passionate about it just because I feel like we needed to make sure it's going to be safe at a state level versus just statistics. So yes, I mean, statistics are useful. Like, I'm not going to turn a blind eye to that. That's, you know, it is what it is. But I just felt like these other companies might be a little bit more efficient across the board as far as what we need as a municipality. So I don't want to keep you guys here 3 hours. So the data is here for you guys to look through. So this one here, this here is just more of kind of a comparison of the 3 companies plus Empower. Just kind of broken out, and a risk memorandum for Empower, and then scope of work, which is kind of what we would expect of the company that we ultimately decided upon who we wanted to use. And based on the data that I pulled, I felt like Trinity was the best, but there's lots of options to choose from. So, and then of course here's the master list. So yes, a lot of data. I think what we probably need to talk about is when do we want to make a decision? How long do we want to weigh on these options? Do we want to use any of these options? Because I don't, Jeremy obviously didn't know that we were going to talk about this until tonight because we had talked about putting a special committee together, and that we're not doing that. So, so I guess how do we want to move forward with choosing and the timeline and criteria?
And I do have a few thoughts to respond, but Jeremy, I want to give you an opportunity to speak first.
So I agree with what you're saying. I agree with what you were saying, Jesse. That we're kind of at this point where we are in this process. We don't have a significant amount of options available to us. And the thing that I am really interested in exploring is looking at whatever plan it is that EdgeConneX has for best available containment technology and all of that, to see if that is the best that we can do to mitigate anything, or if there are more options that we could have. And with Empower, I didn't get the impression that he really works on those kinds of levels. And so I would be interested in reviewing this to find out if these are the kinds of things where they're going to say, okay, this is what they're using and this is why it's the best, but if you did X, Y, and Z, you could further mitigate things this way. And what that would actually look like in terms of real numbers. Yeah,
which is like what I brought up in the meeting was like the guardrails, right? Like, well, what can we? Okay, so this is what's minimally mandated. What more can we ask for to put the extra stuff in place? So, yeah.
No, thank you for putting this together. I appreciate all the effort. A couple thoughts in response. I would say that Empower, and look, I don't know Dr. Cork. I attended a webinar that he presented and had his contact info and reached out, right? I had no knowledge of this market prior to that. But I would say that saying that what he does is statistics is a bit reductive. It is biostatistics. It is a rigorous field of scientific study. And it is in the College of Public Health, right? So it's not, I don't think it's to stay as the statistics, I think is just a bit reductive based on what it actually is. And I think that, for example, if we're looking for, does it meet the state requirement? To me, I think that's a different question, right? Because I think the reason that I asked Dr. Court to come in was essentially the question that hasn't been answered is not whether or not they can meet the state standard and legally operate the power plant in the data center. It's what impact is that going to have on our community, right? What is the real quantifiable impact that could have on our community? Because we've heard a lot of impassioned testimony or statements rather, because we're not a court, right? So impassioned statements from residents, and that's great, and we encourage that participation. But what we don't have is something that is rooted in data and science and kind of established science, particularly around fine particulate matter, of what that impact will be. And so that's sort of the question that I was trying to answer. Because I think that the question of whether it's going to meet the state standard, I would assume that OPSB is going to decide whether it meets the state standard. Like, that's pretty cut and dry. For me, I don't fully agree that there's nothing we can do, because I think that the village opposing the power plant would be heavily considered by the OPSB. And so I think that you guys are probably tired of hearing me say this at this point. I think we have to consider what we're selling. When someone brings $100 million, or an organization brings $100 million and says, everything's going to be fine, safe, perfect, nothing to worry about. Maybe this is the skeptic in me, but I ask, what am I selling? And I'll give an example that maybe isn't the best example, but you guys remember the game Pokemon Go?
Oh, yeah.
When folks walked around during the pandemic and took pictures and found Pokemon and all that stuff. So the company that started that, it was a free game. You could walk around and find Pokemon and, you know, take pictures. And well, fast forward, that company is out of the gaming industry. They are now one of the world's foremost, basically geospatial companies, selling maps and selling.
They data
imagery.
mined us for like
They
10
data
years.
mined. So yeah, you had a free product, but
Yeah.
you sold something
Yeah.
in that process, right? And so that's what I always ask is, what are we selling? And so my thought is that we don't know that, and we don't have an answer because nobody can tell us. They can tell us that it's legal. Legal and safe aren't the same thing. It's legal to smoke cigarettes. It's legal to drink. It's legal to do a lot of things that are unhealthy, right? It's legal to overeat, right? None of those things are safe. And from an email earlier, I'm hard pressed to believe that putting an 800 megawatt power plant within a village will have zero health impacts. And that if there is any health impact whatsoever, that it would be denied. That doesn't hold up to kind of common sense. It just doesn't. You're burning fossil fuels at that scale within the village. But we don't know what that number is, right? And my thought is, let's try to quantify that. And maybe it comes back to, hey, it's really nominal. It's really nothing. I would personally feel a lot better if we had an outside independent body well versed in this stuff, certainly more than I am, right? That could try to quantify what those impacts are so that we can make that informed decision. Because if we, if it is really bad, there's still things that we can do. Is it guaranteed? No. But I think that's an important question that we should ask and we should consider. What is that impact, so that we're going in kind of eyes wide open, right? I had a point and I lost it, so I apologize.
It's okay.
But it'll come back to me later when we adjourn, I'm sure. So that essentially, yeah, that's what I'm kind of coming at the angle from it for is, and I agree with you. I don't think that Dr. Cork could say, hey, put this mitigation in place and it'll decrease the emissions, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important to understand, what are we signing up for, right? Because future phases of that project would require, if it went through, would require another power plant. And if there was one that went in behind Oliver Cheek, that would require another power plant, right? So these are kind of the things I'm considering, because we can't go back. Once it's there, we can't go back.
Yeah,
that's kind of my point. So, off my soapbox there. Any response or rebuttal comment?
I agree with what you're saying. The only thing I would want within the selection of the company, whether it's Empower or one of the other 18 that I found, is that we try to locate or find a company that is going to be, what's the best way to put it, nonpartisan, neutral. I don't necessarily know, based off some things that I've seen, if that's going to be Dr. Cork's organization or not.
Yeah.
But I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
We just need to find a neutral entity. I don't think it's them. That's my own take on it, just based off some things I found over the weekend.
Sure.
But and that's all in there for you guys to look at. We don't have to hash it out. But I feel like we just need to make sure it's a neutral party. It's not, and if it's a little bit of both, if it's a little bit of statistics and stuff grounded in science and using engineers and all that good stuff, great. But I feel like we just need to make sure that we're trying to stick to that guideline of making sure it's a neutral party.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that concerns me about the interview that we had with Dr. Cork was when I was drawing attention to the fact that the sensors that are deployed right now, and we were looking at those trends, they don't support the claims that he was saying in terms of that there would be significant amount of pollution. And I'm not saying that there isn't. And I realize that data center is from what he said, was running at 50%, and that it's not quite the energy production that we would be looking at here. So it's
under a third, but yeah.
Yes. Yep. So I understand that is not necessarily an apples to apples comparison, but what concerned me was that he didn't really seem to be aware of the idea that he would go back and compare those numbers to what his model was to ensure that the theories and hypotheses that he was drawing from those were accurate. Based on what he would put out, because again, you look at that purple air and you look at what those sensors are saying. They're saying that there's a minimal amount, and they're living next to, like, some of those are literally just right across the freeway from an airport. And you would see, I would think, if you're going to see the kind of health hazards that he's talking about, that he outlined in that document that he prepared for them, that you would see that bearing out, like there would be some sort of elevated air quality issues. So that was my concern, is that I have more of an engineering kind of mind, so I want to see hard numbers. And this is such a bleeding edge technology kind of thing in terms of where these things are being placed, that we don't have access to a lot of information. So we need to mine the data that we do have as effectively as we can. And I didn't feel like he was telling me that he's doing that. So that's my pause on using that. And I agree with you that we are not totally out of options, that you are absolutely right. We could do that and we would have to let the chips fall where they may. But it's also no secret that we've got some real big challenges as a village. And obviously, the thing that we need to be concerned about is if this is utterly unsafe for our residents, then it's a terrible deal. And it's not something that we should be doing. But if we can arrive at a conclusion using hard data that whatever risks that there may be, which there's going to be some. I mean, we take risks in driving cars. We take risks in walking down the street. Everything we do in this life has risks. So there is going to be some amount of risk that we are going to have to accept in order to tolerate this in our community. But is the risk too great for what we would be getting out of the deal? And that's really the question that I feel like is at the heart of this. And I would love to know what the Ohio EPA has to say about this, because they probably see this all the time and understand some of the health impacts because that's their business. So I would love to know what the Ohio EPA has to say about this.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's exactly my point. Is, it sounds great. We're getting $35 million for water infrastructure, and the schools are getting 77 or something like that. I can't remember.
64, 65.
I thought that was higher. I thought it was higher than what was in the term sheet.
I'm not sure.
They negotiated something else, but anyway, they're getting at least 64, right? But that's kind of my whole point is, but we don't know what the impact is going to be, and we haven't had numbers, we haven't had data to support that, because if it is, if Dr. Cork was right, and you extrapolate that out, and granted it's a more densely populated area, so I don't think the dollar figures would probably have some disparity in it. But if you look at those long-term impacts on our vulnerable populations, it may not be worth it. But I agree with you, there is some risk. You can't completely eradicate, you're not going to completely eradicate risk, but we don't know if it's an acceptable level. And it is, I think some of this field of study on the impacts of data centers is bleeding edge, to your point, but some of it's not. Some of the burning fossil fuels is not. That's pretty well established, right? And I'm not saying we need to use Dr. Cork. My point just being is that I think we need to have some study from an independent third party that we choose, because frankly, allowing Edge Connects or Power Connects to choose is a lot like letting the fox watch the hen house.
Yep.
Yeah.
In my
Absolutely.
opinion.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And with that, I don't mean to disparage anybody. You have to, at a certain point, you're not going to completely eradicate, bias or partisanship.
Yeah.
You have to trust people to be professionals. But I think it's incumbent on us to try and align the incentives as best we can and I think allowing Edge Connects or Power Connects to choose who does all of these studies, especially when we're getting money to do studies, I think is the fox in the hen house. So certainly am not married to using Dr. Cork's firm. I think he is more at the leading edge of this type of study, but I'm open to speaking with more firms. Certainly some of the firms here. I also reached out to Dr. Archer, Kelly Archer,
Mhm.
at Ohio State's biostatistics. She's the chair of biostatistics at the College of Public Health at Ohio State.
Mhm.
She said that they have professors there that are willing and available to support us. So I am actually setting up a call with her on Friday just to feel out if we're talking about the same thing or not. But to your point, well, both of your points actually, combined together, I think we are going to have to move quickly. Because at the last open house, my understanding is that they were trying to get their air permit reports done by the end of May. And obviously the OPSB process is quite expedited. So I do obviously want to do as thorough an evaluation of potential vendors as we possibly can, recognizing that we're under a tight timeline. I did confirm that if the scope of work is below, it's I think 79,000 and some change, we are not subject to competitive bidding. So we could informally solicit bids and we could award that work. Pardon me. We would need a resolution from council, which we would likely need to expedite as well if we were going to keep the pace. But with that, one of the things I think we need to talk through is timeline and scheduling our next meeting, and what we're going to do at that meeting.
Yep.
Because certainly we can't go to 18. I don't even think we can go to 8 vendors.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, we're looking at maybe a handful.
a handful of vendors.
Yeah.
Which it makes it difficult when we can't talk outside of this meeting. But
More frequent meetings.
yeah, frequent meetings,
Pretty
yeah,
much.
that's what it's going to be.
Yep.
So thoughts on that approach? Just for the sake of something to discuss, I was thinking the next meeting, if we do it 2 weeks from now, we would try to maybe divide and conquer and invite some of these firms to present to us in person or virtually. We can then maybe take a short list to council, deliberate, take a short list to council, and have council obviously vote on it from there.
Yeah.
What are your guys' thoughts on that approach? Definitely not married to that. Open to suggestions.
I'm okay with, depending on when you want to do that in 2 weeks. Obviously we got Memorial Day to contend with, so it would need to be, obviously Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday that week. But I mean, not to press you, I could maybe even look into something next week if you guys wanted to meet sooner. Entirely up to you. So you guys tell me what your lives look like, and we'll go from there.
Can I just say I'm not available on Thursday nights?
On Thursday nights, okay.
Open mic night? No.
There you go.
Nice.
That week of the 25th is all pretty well packed for me.
Okay.
Quite honestly, about the only day that I can meet is probably May 20th,
May 20th,
which would be next Wednesday.
next Wednesday.
Okay.
I could do that.
Okay.
The only challenge with that is getting responses and getting folks available. That's going to be a little bit of a limiting factor too.
Sure. Yeah.
But if that's the only day that works, that's the only day that works. We just.
Yeah. I mean,
Express
nobody's
the
going to want to meet
urgency.
on Memorial Day, and unfortunately.
Oh no, I get it. That's a.
Maybe we just we all find one that we feel passionate about, and then just try to see if we can set the meetup, for that day or something.
Put urgent in your cold outreach.
Hey, do you want to make some money? No.
Yeah. So, what's going to be the best way to do that? Because we really can't communicate too much, except for to put I'm going to contact this person.
We can send it to April, and April can share it with us.
Okay.
You guys can share information with each other, you just can't discuss it.
Can't deliberate. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll take OSU.
Okay.
And
All right. I'll pick one, and then you'll pick one. And
Yeah, I'll go ahead, and I think Trinity was the one I found to be the best, so I'll reach out to Trinity and see
okay. Then I will pick one of not Trinity's.
one of the other.
Yeah.
19, 18. Okay.
perfect. So the 20th at 6 p.m. again? Does
Okay.
that work?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry for folks watching. It's like paint drying, I'm sure. Our calendars. Okay, so next meeting, our goal is to all have, if we can, somebody that can present. We're trying to, just so we're all in alignment, we're trying to answer the question of what is the, quantify the health impact to the community to the best that we can.
Yep.
Using data and scientific methods, not emotion. Anything else
No, I don't have anything else.
on that one?
Yeah, I don't have anything else on that one.
Okay.
Yep.
That's all I have for new business. Any other topics for new business?
I guess the only question that I would have is are there any other studies? It feels like as a community, we've kind of worked through a lot of the other things like, well, is it going to be noisy? Is it going to pollute the water? Is it going to be these things? And I feel like in general, maybe we have a more solid grip on that. And the last piece is the air. Is that correct? Or do we need to look at something else, that some other aspect of study that we're not considering?
I would be, go ahead, Jesse.
No, you're good. I'm just thinking out loud.
I think the most pressing in my mind is the air, but the others, put it this way, I'm not opposed to having those if they can be bolted on, but I would say that I think the air is probably the highest at this point. But I mean, I'm certainly open to, noise and light. The downward facing lights, I would hope that between downward facing lights and a berm and trees that, hopefully that would be minimal, but noise, I know there are limits to what you can do. So if I was to rank order them, it would be air, noise, light, air, noise, water, light would probably be and noise and water are probably like 2A and 2B.
Okay.
I don't disagree with that, but if it's not any louder than a train, I think we'll be okay.
Well, and that's
But it's
the
constant. But it's
Yeah.
constant. That's the
Yeah,
difference.
constant, yeah.
it's constant. The thing that the thing I'm mostly concerned about is the houses that are on the other side of the tracks, because
Yep.
again,
The
they're going to have to go through a berm. They're going to have to go through at least two kind of levels of trees, and then also past train tracks. And I'm mostly concerned about the lower frequencies in that. But yeah,
That's a good point. I think, yeah, and obviously we have to look at budget and what we can afford. And,
sure.
But
I mean, if we have to spend money on anything and we can only afford one, then it needs to be the air.
But I'm for all of it. I think the more information we have, the better. More independent information that we can get.
Okay, I will just at least try to look at a couple of noise people who study audiologists, things of that nature, just to see what they even charge for it. I mean, and what they could even offer.
Yeah.
I'll try to look into that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll ask when I reach out to Trinity what the scope is, if it's all encompassing or if it's just air, or what it is, and go from there.
Great.
That's good. All right. No other new business?
Nope, I don't have anything.
All right. Motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you.